As March was wrapping up, livestock owners were looking forward to getting their animals back on grass. We chat with a rancher about a grazing technique that's good for both livestock and the land.
I have solid foot in science and a solid foot in day-to-day ranching operations and how to make money.
Jim Garish has spent 22 years at the University of Missouri working in grazing and research. He has countless more years of ranching experience and was in Lloydminster for this year's AgriVisions, speaking on optimizing grazing for both livestock and pasture performance. He advocates 4 key points to achieve best grazing practices.
We always need to balance the soil and plant needs against the livestock needs, and that, of course, is balanced against our financial needs there.
Jim Garish says the willingness to waste grass separates healthy, profitable cattle grazing pastures from those that fail. He says you can see a 60% increase in yield from rotating cattle daily onto another pasture.
Dr. Zavala talked about the importance of having a diversity of roots and microbes in the soil. The way you create a diversity of roots and microbes in the soil is through a diversity of plants above ground. That also gives us good animal nutrition. Animals like eating diversity.
So his 4 points are: leave some grass behind, don't overgraze a pasture, allow pasture recovery time, have multiple plants for eating and biodiversity. This will support better soil health, and better soil health means better plants, healthy productive livestock, and reduced outside inputs. Garish says if you're running a cattle ranch as a business, you need to readjust your focus.
Cattle ranching can be very profitable if the business is correctly structured.
Keeping pesticide waste out of the environment is another good way for producers to demonstrate their commitment to protecting the land that brings forth the food we eat. Let's learn about a technique that's supporting the environmental stewardship effort.
The producer washes down the sprayer and distributes it doesn't distribute it, but concentrates it in one area.
Larry Brawl is a water quality engineer with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. He's attached to the Science and Technology branch in Regina. He says about 80% of pesticides that end up in the environment has to do with how they are being handled, especially as producers wash the sprayer when moving between crops.
But we have technology where if they can collect it and trickle it on this biobed, the microorganisms in the biobed will actually degrade the pesticides.
The original technology came from Europe and is being adapted to the Canadian climate in Lethbridge, Vegreville, and Grand Prairie, Alberta, as well as Outlook and Simpson, Saskatchewan.
Environmental aspect of farming is always a challenge to justify, but if the producer does not use good environmental stewardship, that can eventually affect their product.
Brawl says they're finding that producers will wash their sprayers about 10 to 15 times as they switch between crops. So 2 biobeds of about 8 by 8 feet or 2.5 meters square and a half meter deep will keep about 98% of the pesticides out of the environment.
A lot of people are demanding products that are produced in an environmentally sustainable manner. And that's a long-term thing. And so producers need to be sensitive to how they produce their goods.
Well, what does society expect of the ag sector in the 21st century when it comes to animal welfare? Here's a researcher who feels producers need to read the signs of the times.
When you dismiss people who believe that animals have rights as lunatics and radicals, you're making a serious tactical error.
Societal changes from the 60s to the present form the backdrop for Dr. Bernard Rowland's assertions that producers need to pay attention to the concerns of the animal welfare movement. He was speaking on societal expectations on animal welfare in the 21st century at this year's Alberta Farm Animal Care Conference. The American lecturer, who has a PhD in philosophy, says industrial agriculture was created to get as much money out of animals as possible, but he says there's a new driving force.
And now there's another imperative. Give them a chance to exercise their natural behaviors.
Dr. Rowland feels that animal welfare practices are moving forward as he points to examples in Ontario's swine industry where producers are repurposing their existing spaces.
They built a system with a lot of baffles, so the sows can find a place where they can eat, and they're fed in small groups, and they can move around.
Dr. Rowland says this has reduced leg and foot injuries. He adds another change is in zoos where they have come away from animal enclosures that did not recognize an animal's social needs.
Now there's an entire field called behavioral enrichment in the zoo, based on ethological knowledge.
Ethology studies animal behavior with a focus on natural conditions. Another concern of Dr. Rowland is the stunning of animals before slaughter. He says while this works for cattle, it gets a failing grade for chickens, and they are working on an alternative. He's also sharing with cattle producers that it's in their best interest to use pain-reducing medication to improve the life experiences of their herd. This is difficult in the U.S., which does not have an approved drug like Canada.
In the U.S., there is not a single post-surgical analgesic approved for cattle, for any farm animal.
In moving animal welfare practices forward, Dr. Rowland is hopeful in finding a balance between industry needs, government policies, activists, and the natural inclinations of animals.
We have to incorporate the social desires into the design of these systems.
And when we come back, we meet the nocturnal guardian. Ag Life, the A in Review, continues after this break. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Ag Life, the year in review. Now, while producers get some shut-eye at night, one of our furry friends keeps a watchful eye on the farm. Let's meet the nocturnal guardian.
She came to us from an alpaca farm in BC. Both of her parents are livestock guardian dogs.
This is Tallulah. She's 6 years old and she mostly rests during the day. But at night, her job is to guard the 50 or so alpacas on this farm.
Ours happens to be an Akbash Maremma cross. And one of the things about Akbash, which is a Turkish breed, is that they never guard against people. So my business partners, Trudy and Corey McCall, have 4 children. So when the kids were small, it was really important when their little friends were over playing with them that the dog didn't try to protect the children from the other children.
Lou is the 3rd livestock guardian dog on this farm. She patrols the territory at night looking out for predators like coyotes and bears. Merkley says you can't train these dogs to do what they need to do. Lou comes from working parents, but livestock dogs also have amazing instincts.
The very first puppy we ever had came into the alpaca pens when she was 8 weeks old, and the alpacas didn't know her, and they all got very nervous and alert and afraid, and that little puppy at 8 weeks old sat down and turned her head away and completely removed the threat.
Lou is very friendly and likes to be petted, but many livestock dogs are more inclined to be about their business.
It was about 8 o'clock in the evening, and the alpacas gave alarm call. And Lou was down here at Trudy and Corey's house, and she heard and came running up the hill as soon as she heard the alpacas give the alarm call. And that night, and she never found the bear, she never got in contact with the bear, but that night, all night, we could hear her barking and barking and barking.
It's birthing season and TNC Farms has about 8 baby alpacas on board. Let's hope Tallulah doesn't have a busy night ahead.
When I hear Lou barking in the night, I think, oh, good girl, and I go back to sleep.
Indeed. Well, finding the balance on the family farm is always a challenge. We meet a bison producer who's putting in the work and reaping the rewards.
I read an article about these bison. I got kind of excited about it as being the lazy man's cow.
20 years on and the shifting winds of time have sharpened the sensitivities of Ken Farkash, who switched from cattle to North America's largest wild animal, the bison. His land is good for grain and livestock, with some 1,500 acres dedicated to bison. He admits they've learned a lot over the years.
Just basically barbed wire, 5 strands of barbed wire. The top wire being about 5 feet. They respect the barbed wire. The page wire they would tend to rub on and they'll crawl underneath.
Farkash says bison are not labor intensive and the less you do the better, and you don't have to be out there calving. He says they're happy with what they have accomplished, but some of their mistakes brought them close to giving up.
2 years ago, we had one of our staff didn't secure the gate in the feedlot, and we had a whole pen of finished bison bulls get out, and we wondered whether we'd ever get them back in.
That's about $80,000 worth of bison running loose, so they were happy when the last one wandered back home. Animal handling was critical to getting them all back, and it's part of his do's and don'ts.
Bison's a little different. Sometimes you have to be patient. If they want to stop and think about things a little bit, you just stop and you give them some time.
And why not? You're talking about an animal that weighs 2,000 pounds. Farkash has weathered BSE and the drought of the early 2000s. He has about 7 staff members and has moved the operation from calving to finishing animals and is aiming to grow the herd to 400. With stable prices, he says it's a solid business.
It's a kind of business now that I would say that will buy the farm.
Bison produces lean meat, so it has a shorter cooking time and is craved for its flavor. Overall, he credits good management, safety, and still having fun. And he's thankful for good relations with his wife and family.
I want to manage for success and for enjoyment. And, you get all those things in the right order, and it can be a lot of fun.
Well, this year's National Food Report Card puts Saskatchewan ahead of the class in food production. However, food wastage is a real concern across the country.
Last year, when we compared Canada and the world, we discovered that Canada is among the most wasteful societies in the world, with Australia and the Danes.
Jean-Charles Levaly is the Associate Director at the Centre for Food in Ottawa. While the second food report card has put Saskatchewan in front of all provinces, he says across the supply chain there are food losses.
The value of that loss and waste is $31 billion. If you include all the resources that we put into food, that's just food, the $31 billion becomes $107 billion.
Half of all the food waste is at the household level. Levaly says people need to understand best before dates, which is not always a food safety or health issue, but a quality concern.
People will still throw it out because they see the date and they think, oh, it's not good for me. But it's really still safe. In many cases, if unopened, it's still good for weeks or months, depending on the product.
He says Saskatchewan buys food in bulk and in large portions, more so than other provinces. Also, families prepare meals in adequate sizes and throw out less bags of groceries.
About 30 to 40% of food is wasted. So when you come out of the shop and you're carrying 3 bags, you may as well just throw away one of the 3 bags you just bought because that's what you're doing that week anyway. And in Saskatchewan, it's among the lowest in the country.
Yes, Saskatchewan. Overall, Canadian producers do a tremendous job making food available, but consumers need to step up to the plate.
We have to improve on our food literacy, our ability to understand labels, to prepare food, to store food, to reduce waste.
Alberta's Ag Minister was in the border city at the start of August. O'Neill Collier tells us about the new Growing Forward program.
Going to be called the Canadian Agriculture Partnership, and I was really honored to be able to take part in that because the last program contributed $406 million into the agriculture industry here in Alberta, and looking forward to being able to make that contribution to the next program.
So we're looking for a similar in terms of dollar value?
The dollar value would be very similar. There's always going to be some changes as opposed to some of the programs. Programs, everything from environmental sustainability to markets and trades to risk management, the agri-insurance, et cetera, that farmers now have.
And I think that was one of the concerns that I'm seeing coming out of Saskatchewan. The feeling there is in terms of late signing up for agri-stability and those kinds of things there. There was some concern about that, and they're saying they won't be part of that because, as you said, the risk involved, you need to be proactive in dealing with your risk. What's your thoughts there?
My conversations with producers across the province, agri-insurance is very well subscribed to, close to 90% in a lot of the regions. So it's a program that works fairly well. But the agri-stability wasn't working well for our producers, probably in all the prairie provinces where it doesn't work well for cow-calf, it doesn't work for crop farmers. So we're able to do a little bit of tweaking. Saskatchewan has taken the stance that the late participation to ag stability is not something that they're interested in. I'm willing to look at that to make and see if that will help ag stability be more user friendly for our producers. But I'm cautious to see how it actually might work.
And up next, the bill started in the spring and was done before fall. Ag Life, the Year in Review continues after this break. Do stay with us.